Hey guys, give me a second. I'm still trying to get set up here. There we go. Okay, so it's Tuesday, September 28th at 3:30. So I'm here to give you all another live. Today, we're going to talk about probation violations. I've been getting a lot of questions lately from people about probation violations or potential probation violations and what to do about them. So we will talk about that today. I guess the first thing that I need to make clear is, we use the term probation generally to encompass community supervision and deferred adjudication. So the differences are straight probation is a conviction, meaning you're convicted of the offense, but rather than being subject to a prison sentence or a jail sentence in the county jail, your sentence is probated and you're placed on community supervision. Deferred adjudication is a special type of community supervision where if you complete that term of community supervision successfully, the charges will be dismissed and you will not become convicted of whatever offense you were on deferred for. But most of what we're going to talk about today encompasses both of them, and so we'll just call them probation violations or how that process works. And so, people always want to know if they get a motion filed against them, they always want to know what's going to happen to me. And there's a whole lot that goes into the answer. From which court you're in, meaning which judge is going to hear your case, what were the violations. There's just so much we need to know. And, there's, for the most part, two types of motions that we deal with most of the time. One is for what we call technical violations, like you didn't fulfill the terms sometimes just at the rate that they want. For instance, if you have 200 hours of community service to do, your judgment might say that you had to do at least 16 hours a month. So sometimes people fall behind, and once you fall behind, it just keeps snowballing until you get far enough behind that your probation officer wants to do something about it, okay? Falling behind on money is another technical, but that gets more complicated because we don't really have debtor's prison in Texas, and so we don't send people to jail, generally speaking, for money. A lot of times there are other technical violations like failing a drug test because they'll give you random tests when you're on probation, things like that, okay? So those are usually what we call technical violations. The other that we get very commonly is obviously a new law violation, which means you're on probation and now you've been accused of another crime. So first we'll talk about technicals and sort of how that process works. At least here in Galveston County, for technicals, usually your probation officer will take you into court to have a meeting with the judge to admonish you about your technicals and sort of have a conversation about why you're not doing good or what the problem is with you not living up to the terms of your probation. I have mixed feelings about this process because your probation officer will tell you that you don't need an attorney and it's just an informal meeting, and so you get to go to court with the judge And usually other probationers and, the judge will listen to you and make a decision whether or not to take you into custody, modify your probation, or do nothing. The reason I have a problem with them doing that this way is that the judge can and often does decide that they're going to take you into custody and have the state file a motion. Meanwhile, you've been in court without a lawyer answering questions that are coming from the judge about what you've been doing or, what have you. So that can be an uncomfortable situation. We have had situations where people hired us to go to court with them for that setting. It just depends on the circumstances of why you're having problems and what we recommend at that point. If you have a new law violation, meaning you've been accused of another crime, there is not going to be any such meeting where there can be an alternative. The state will file a motion to revoke your probation or a motion to adjudicate the guilt if you were on deferred adjudication. And you will be arrested and then have to deal with that. So in both situations, people always want to know, well, what's going to happen? And again, since we practice in these Galveston County courts every day, we have a pretty good idea, depending upon your circumstances, what may happen with your particular judge. If you're on deferred, well, first of all, on either of them, there's always the option to extend your probation. So if you're on for 2 years, which is the minimum on a felony, maybe we can extend you a year and add some other conditions or more community supervision. Many times, if your issue is drug related, meaning failing drug tests, we can do another sanction, outpatient rehab, inpatient rehab, depending upon your needs. Most of the courts will work with you on addiction and have you assessed to determine what form of treatment might be best for you if you want it. Because, in 23 years of doing this, one thing I figured out for sure is if someone does not want rehab, sending them into inpatient, outpatient, any of it, if they don't want it, it's not going to work. But if you're in that situation with a violation of your probation and you would like some help, most of the judges across the street are going to work with you and find some alternative rather than send you to prison. Now, new law violations, it gets trickier. First, what were you on probation for? And then now, what is the new crime that you're accused of? As you can imagine, if it's the same crime, you're not looking good. Again, one exception being if it's drug use, then we may be able to, again, put you in some type of rehab or figure out some way to help you. If you are on probation for a victim crime, aggravated robbery, anything, any victim-related crime, that's going to come into play if you've committed a new law offense, what your punishment might be. If you're on deferred adjudication, which for some people is a great program because if they had no other defenses, then this gives them an opportunity to avoid a conviction, which is obviously much bigger when we're talking about a felony conviction. Sometimes, depending upon your violation, one option, which isn't great, but for those people on deferred, if it's beyond where we could extend it or come up with some other alternative, then one option is to adjudicate you guilty, but rather than send you to prison, now place you on straight probation. And like I said, it's not great, but at least it helps people avoid a prison sentence. So, those are generally some options that you have when we're talking about violations of probation. Many times people think, well, sometimes people think they can talk it out with their probation officer. What you need to understand is it's generally not up to your probation officer. They have a boss that they have to report to. And so if you're falling behind on something, if you have a new case, don't think they can't report it or won't report it. They have to, and it's not their sole discretion whether or not to file a motion or even take you into court to have you admonished. It's going to be their supervisor's decision. So sometimes people will call me and say, my probation officer loves me. I don't think he or she will even do anything. And I have to tell them it's not your probation officer's decision. He or she has a boss, and that boss is going to tell them whether or not they have to file a motion with the court to revoke or adjudicate you. So obviously it's good if you have a good relationship with your probation officer, but ultimately it won't be his or her decision whether or not to take action if you find yourself in violation. What else? What other questions did I have on probation? I mean, that's generally it. We have had odd situations. I had one recently where the motion, this was really strange. The guy had reported to his probation officer, and she said, okay, you're done. This is the last time you'll ever see me, because his termination date was like within the next 30 days. And so he says, okay, thank you. And she says, all right, good luck. Well, in those next 30 days, they found out that he had been arrested in Florida. So unbeknownst to him, they file a motion to revoke him again weeks before he was actually going to physically terminate, and he was not going to see his officer again. So he did not know this. The case that he was charged with in Florida was eventually dismissed. But for, I guess it was about 5 years, he had this warrant out there and didn't know it, and got picked up back here in Texas on that probation violation. And we were ultimately able to get that dismissed, and he got back out. But sometimes procedurally things will happen that allow us to get you a good result on a motion to revoke or adjudicate you. There are some due diligence claims that we can make depending upon when the motion was filed. I once had a hearing where my client was in the last months of a 10-year deferred. And, statistically speaking, a lot of people don't make it 10 years on deferred. A lot of people like to take it, but many people don't successfully complete 10 years. My client was in her last several months of a 10-year deferred and was charged with a misdemeanor possession of marijuana case. And they filed a motion to adjudicate her guilty, and which could have potentially made her a felon and put her in prison. We could not reach an agreement. They were adamant that they weren't going to do anything other than adjudicate her guilty and send her. So we had a hearing. Of course, I was not, I thought the state was being unreasonable. So we go through this full hearing, and at the end, not only did the judge terminate my client, meaning just terminated her that day, didn't, you don't have to do any more on your probation. He told the state, don't ever waste my time like this again. So that was a good day. But there can just be so many possible outcomes. Sometimes if your case, if your motion to adjudicate or revoke is based upon a new law violation, we generally try to put off the motion until we can defend the new case. The theory being if I can beat the new case, if I can get it dismissed, if I can get a not guilty from a jury, what have you, then there is no basis for the motion to revoke, right? So if you're on probation and you get a DWI, possession, whatever it is, but you've had no other problems, and I think that case is defensible, I'll try to attack that case first. That way, if I can make that go away, then there is not really anything for the state to go on the motion to revoke. Every once in a while, and this is individual basis, but there have been times in my career where the sitting judge would not let me wait on the new case. Basically, the sitting judge can say we're going forward on the motion to revoke or motion to adjudicate, and the new case can wait. That doesn't happen a lot, but it definitely has happened in my career, and with a handful of results. Sometimes the state will then make an offer to work out both cases, and the client will take it. Sometimes we go with the hearing, client gets revoked or does not, and we just go with it as it goes. Sometimes a client will get what we like to say hammered on a motion to revoke, meaning get a lot of time, and then just refuse to plead on the new case. And so every once in a while the state will say, oh, you got enough time on that motion to revoke, we'll just dismiss the new case. There's just almost any combination of scenarios you can guess can come out of these types of situations. I don't see, let me see Mama, Randall, and Barbara, Sandra, Paula, Nanette, but we don't have any questions today. I've been on for about 17 minutes, so I guess we'll call that long enough for today. I hope those that had reached out with violation of probation questions, I hope I answered your questions. As always, if you ask me a general question, I just have to guess at what you might want me to say. So if anyone has a specific question, just ask me in an email or on here, and I'll try to be as specific as possible. Nanette, I saw that you asked me last week to talk about eminent domain, and on these I'm only talking about criminal defense topics. So maybe I can email you or something on the eminent domain. But that's it for this week. I'll hope you all have a great week, and I'll see y'all next week.